The Manage Database dialog is going to become very familiar to you. You're going to spend a lot of time in this dialog because this is where you create the structure or schema of your database. Where we're at right now is the field section. Because we have one table, we won't need any relationships, and once we start creating tables, then we'll create relationships and we'll see how that works. Right now we're just making a contact manager, a flat file with just one table and a bunch of fields. So we're going to go in here and type in our field names in here, but before you start doing that, you have to consider, what are my naming conventions for fields? Now every developer is different. There's many naming conventions out there as developers. Everyone is a little bit different and some are a lot different. What you need to do is develop a naming convention that works for you. Now I'm going to point out the basics to you, some ideas to get you started. I can't go into every possible naming convention. Some of them are quite convoluted. They make sense for teams of programmers who work on a single solution. Most people don't need that kind of naming convention. But you should really take a look at what the developers say so you can get some ideas from them and use the ones that make sense. So on the FileMaker.com website there is a PDF that talks about naming conventions. And it's quite long, it's almost 100 pages, but it's worth taking a look at. So one of the things you need to consider in your basic naming conventions is, will this ever go to the web? And the answer is, it's very likely. You may not think it's going to go to the web, be deployed on the website to a web browser and things like that, but it could. Your boss might say, oh yeah, I'd like this to go on the web now. Well, you should have told me that before, right? But what you have to do is consider that when you're doing things. So on the web you have to think about, well, I've done a Google search before, and if you've done a Google search and looked at the URL string, there's all this information about what you searched for in there. And so the FileMaker, when you deploy it to the web, works the same way. It creates a name value pair that puts all the information that you're searching for from the web browser inside that URL. And so if you go back to read that URL when you're troubleshooting something or just reading it and trying to figure out what's going on, well, you don't want to have some weird characters in there. Because, for instance, if you put spaces inside of your FileMaker fields, which FileMaker has no problem with, the web doesn't know spaces in a URL. So what's going to happen is it's going to be a %20. It's going to make it much more difficult for you to read. So the general rule, because you may deploy to the web, is use lowercase and lower ASCII. The other basic thing is it just has to make sense. You have to be able to look at this field and instantly recognize it. Shouldn't be too long or too short, just the right length, and try to obey that. And we'll pick up some other things as we're going along and throughout all these tutorials, but those are some basic ideas. Do something that makes sense. Think about this. Don't just start typing. And you're going to get an idea for this right off the bat when we start doing this. So let's start with our first field for a contact manager, which will be company. And we'll simply go ahead and type it right in there. And then it's very important before you create this field that you come over here and type in a comment. Now company is pretty obvious, you probably don't need a comment for this. But think about some other fields that are used by scripts or calculations that really aren't in the interface. You may go down 6 months down the line and go, what was that field all about? I can't remember. And having a comment here will really save you. So we'll put something in like, this field stores data about the organization. There we go, and then we'll just hit create. And you can see it moves the field up here. You've actually created it. And then what we can do is come over here and type in the next field. Now I'm going to type in name first. Notice I have an underscore in there. And it's not first underscore name, but name first. That's so that the first name and the last name are together when you sort this list of fields. Makes it really handy. So the other thing you want to consider here is that, yes, you need a comment for every field, but I'm not going to do that because it's going to take too much time here. So we're going to remove that comment, but you should always put comments in. It'll be a lifesaver down the road. So we're going to go ahead and hit create here. You'll see name first goes up there, and then we'll type in name last. And instead of going down to the mouse and grabbing it to move to the create button, you can simply hit the enter or return key.